everyone, and welcome to the 21st episode of Wheel Tapping. We are back to normal today. We are going to talk about 18CZ, Czechoslovakia, with my friend, Mr. Tony Fryer, who is, he's sitting right here. How you doing, Tony? How's it going today?
Hey. It's going pretty darn fantastic. It's a beautiful Friday evening here, and couldn't be better.
I'd say, out here in Pennsylvania today, it is super, super windy. It's a good thing I'm in the basement. It would be literally howling. It's insane. It blew over a trash can full of mulch today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is why we're recording tonight instead of tomorrow morning, because I have yard work now that I didn't, I didn't plan on that. So, but it's all good. It's all good. So are you excited to talk about CZ? This is
I am. CZ is should be an interesting topic, right?
Yeah. For those of you who may have caught us, we literally just finished up playing a 2-player game. So that'll be on the website. Well, it'll be on the YouTubes along with this one, so you can check it out. I had not played the 2-player variant, so I didn't quite get it. So Tony and I decided, hey, let's play 2-player and let's see what this is all about, and more on why later. But there's definitely good reason for that. Tony, before we jump into things, we don't do commercials, right? Like, we don't.
Right.
But there are a few Kickstarter things running around right now that I kind of thought we should talk about. Luckily, there's 2 that kind of have. They kind of fall in the 18XX. One falls squarely on the 18XX, and the other is a little aside. So if you've been paying attention to any of the shows, we talk about game toppers. I love Berkey, period. He's just awesome dude in the business, number one. And while you may not need a game topper for 18XX games, what I will tell you is if you need a mat for your table, this guy has the best mats. And we've talked numerous times about me drawing one for him. And frankly, I've drawn many and I just haven't been happy with what I've drawn yet, but it will come someday. It will come someday. But right now they're good quality mats. They're like 2mm neoprene stitched edge. I love these things. They're just awesome. So he has those available on Kickstarter right now. And if you're interested in either getting a game table or something like that, it's a great option, and I just encourage you to check that out. The other one, however, is a little more, dare I say, controversial, because this is by Mercury Games. And Mercury Games, now they redid the container version. Tony, what did you think about the new version of Container that came out?
Well, I love Container. I've played the new version once, because I didn't buy the new version, but because I had the old version, right?
Right.
But it's pretty cool handling those big ships.
Yeah. So they certainly know how to make nice quality stuff, and I love Capitals, so like they know their way. And now, number one, do not take this as endorsement by any means. Literally, the only thing I got paid is a couple what I will now use as priority deal markers for different games. But what they did send was they sent some of their new 18 shares prototypes over to us, and they sent some of these chips, and these are nice, Tony, I have to say. Now, whether you choose to need them or not, I leave that aside. That's entirely up to you to decide whether it's something you decide you want to use in your games or not, whether you're happy. We were having this discussion before the show, and we're like, are you paper guy? Are you the guy who likes construction paper? Do you want to laminate your shares? Do you want to have cards made for your shares? And if you're the super, super extra, then maybe you're the guy who wants these, and that's cool. But I just wanted to show people what they are. So to tell you how much I value chips, I just have a basic set of Eclipse. I don't have fancy, heavy Monte Carlos, and the shares are a little larger. than your standard chip by about I'd say 20%. It's a little bigger, and definitely a little heavier. They've got some girth. They have the writing on the side, and they'll tell you which ones are the president's share by the different colors. But they're nice. They're chunky. I like the logo. I kind of feel dirty not sending the New York Central to Tony. I kind of feel like I should.
My favorite railroad.
Yeah, so that might make your way out your way, and I'll keep the PRR. I did tell Tony, I'm like, if they would have put the CNO in here, they probably would have had me, because the CNO is my favorite railroad.
Well, Chris, I'd be happy to take that, but you must personally deliver it with a visit to Denver.
It's definitely possible. And then they sent like a $5 chip, and this honestly, I'm not gonna lie, it's a nice chip. If you don't have a set, it's probably a great set to take, but it's pretty much on par, maybe a skosh lighter than my clips are. And I have probably, oh my goodness, I have enough banks to run a full game of OE sitting over there in Eclipse chips. And then Tony's favorite, a plaque. So I have a few plaques sitting there, so we can run some big games. So if they're interesting to you, and you want a personal opinion, feel free to shoot me a message. You know where I am on Twitter. I run that account. I'd be happy to tell you more about the chips, since I actually have them in my hand. If you're on the fence and you had some curiosities, let me know. I'd be happy to talk to you about them. But that's it. I just wanted to kind of point those couple out, because I think they're different. Cool. So Tony, are you drinking anything tonight? Because I am.
Of course, you know it. I am drinking a local Denver distillery product, Laws. Ooh. So I don't know what their distribution's like, but if you're out there and you see Laws, buy it. This is a 6-year bonded rye. Delicious.
I'd say I'd trade you a chip I got for free in the mail for a bottle of that, but I kind of feel like that's not fair or genuine. So I am I'm actually so friend of the show, Clay had sent me a bottle of Michener's Straight Kentucky Rye. So
way to go, Clay.
I know. Clay's got some good taste, man, in friends and in bourbon. So
he's a good guy.
He is. So anyway, all that's behind us. Let's move on to, well, I don't want to say the meat of the podcast, because plenty of other people do that meat of the podcast. But let's move on to what we're going to talk about, which is 18CZ. So this is designed by Lonnie Orgler, and Lonnie's friend of the show. We've had him on in the past, and we thought to have him on, but we kind of thought we'd spare that side and kind of talk a little bit more about like the 2-player experience and things like that. So that's why he's not joining us today. Not because he said no, clearly, just because we didn't ask, because we're like that. We're mean. So Tony, what do you think about what are some of the key components of CZ compared to other games in the 18xx genre? What sets it apart?
One of the most obvious things when you get into the game is there's a fixed number of rounds, right? Mm-hmm. There's only, 8 sets? And
I do believe.
And the game progresses from there's 1 OR per set to 2, and then finally to 3. But it's a fixed length game.
CZ is pretty cool. It was designed in 2017, so it's like one of the newer games, right? Mm-hmm. Pretty new. It's also plays 2 to 6 players, and we got done a 2-player game in 2 hours. It was almost to the nose. So, nice if you got friends and you got things, and that includes Tony explaining some of the differences and how some of the other stuff works, because it's not a straight up 2-player game at all.
It was fun.
Excellent. So how many times have you played CZ, Tony?
19. 7 times of those 19 have been 2 players.
Excellent.
Tonight was number 7.
There you go. I think I'm sitting at 7 overall, and I've played a mix. Now I've played a mix of all counts, up to 5, 2 to 5. So
I played a 6-player game at a convention a while back, and it was rough and brutal.
I have a feeling that that's one of those where you get a minor and you never get the company that matches because it's just not going to work. Nobody will let you have it.
Not sure I'd recommend it at 6.
Fair.
Stick to 5 or less.
Cool. So I did bring up the minors in the auction, and this is a huge difference, I think, to a lot of other games that we've talked about, reviewed, and things, because it's more or less a paid draft, right? Like, it's a Rochester. You basically are buying a private from the center, and that's it. And it's a snake on top of that. So yeah, it goes back and forth and back and forth, and a la Catan. And it's different because there are 3 tiers of companies. So we have small, medium, and large. In the private company arena, that'll be mirrored again in the larger companies and entities as we get to them. But it's definitely, you want to marry those up. If you buy small miners, you want to have small companies to buy them in and use their powers. Now, selling them isn't hard, but generally speaking, you're giving somebody else an advantage. So unless you have a stake in why they're doing it, it might be a little disadvantageous for you. And it doesn't take a ton of money to start companies at the beginning of the game. So there's a lot of free money floating around. Income can be pretty good in definitely in the first 2 of each level. Income to cost ratio is very good. You don't have to worry about somebody bidding you up. But it's wow, it's so different, like how it impacts the game right at the beginning, because I think your entire game is determined right in that initial auction. More so than I have the CNA, I have to open the PRR. It's not but it's, I have 2 small companies I need to focus on starting a small company, and it can buy both of them in, but definitely different.
Yeah, the privates in this game, they call them, local bonds, local railways.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're interesting because, like you said, they're small, medium, and large. And as you buy them, their values increase, but their resale value is set as the game progresses, right? So every OR, like if you look on the track, it's got a little dollar value on it. So every OR, the privates, quote unquote, get a little more valuable, right? So it's kind of one of those like, boy, if I hold on to this longer, I can get more out of it, and of course they give you those special abilities, right? Like they could either give you a terrain discount or lay a tile that has the purple edges. And so, and like you said, like it does affect how you play, how you open the game, but it doesn't lock you into, like you said, I bought this private, so I better start this major or minor or whatever.
Right.
Because these companies aren't located on the board. But the way it affects your start is, like in my mind, there's a right number of them to buy. Like I don't want to buy too few and I don't want to buy too many, because I want to have a little money. Those things give great income. But like I can remember the other day when we were playing that big 5-player game, I purposely said, oh look, I'm just going to buy one and then put all my money into a company. The game didn't work out so good for me, So yeah. I think you got to buy a couple or something, and not go hog wild.
And it's funny because they don't give you a ton of money, not like other privates, because you can only ever buy them up to face value. But the tile could be crucial at a moment where you really need it. And you were kind of talking also about that sales. You can at any point sell that company back to the bank. So you can, in this,
well, the company's getting
right. You might be getting way ahead of ourselves into shenanigan territory.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's not talk about that yet.
But suffice to say, I think that there is long-term ramifications, and I also think that there's long-term planning that you can have for this entire game based on the initial companies you buy. Like if you buy all small and a medium, you might not ever be a person who starts a large company, because that might not be the direction you end up going. And those companies might foretell that, and I think in a different way.
I think, one of the cool things about the way this game works, right? Mm-hmm. You've already alluded to it, right? In the privates, these local bonds, there's small, medium, and large ones. Well, there's also small, medium, and large share companies. And kind of the rule of 18 CZ is a company can always acquire a company that is smaller, right? Except with the local bonds, it's a little bit different, right? Like a medium-sized public company can eat a medium-sized or a little private, blah, blah, blah. So there's this whole like synergy of what do you want to buy? Because if I focus too much on buying large private companies, I won't have a company to sell that to and use that special power till later in the game. But you know what? I'm going to need those green doinks a lot sooner than that, right? And so there's the way the companies work with the small, medium, large, and how they can acquire things definitely has an impact on what you buy in this first auction. It's not even an auction. It's like you said, it's a sale of privates.
Yeah, it's almost like a paid draft. It's very different.
There's no bidding. It's there. It's $30. You buy it, right?
Yeah, and those purple tiles, especially for the operational brained people like myself, they're very limited.
The yellow.
Yeah, that's going to come up again for sure.
And maybe let's talk about the capitalization real quick.
Yeah, sure. Let's go into
these small companies. They're only 4 shares.
Right.
The presidency's 50%, and there's 2 25% shares, and they float at 50, and you get all the money.
All the money.
And then the mediums are 5 shares, so everything's 20%, right? The president's 40, they float at 60, and you get all the money. And the big companies, the big national companies, are 10%ers, right? So the presidency's 20.
Right.
At 50%, it floats, and you get all the money.
Yeah, so full cap.
Full cap.
But they all behave very differently. Like I've seen small companies survive to the end of the game. I've seen medium survive. I've seen people have no large. I think what this game brings is a huge amount of variety, which is,
in how you can play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. For sure. So if it sounds confusing, well, it is. There's a lot going on. But let's start moving into the yellow phase, and we'll talk about each of these in part. And I think that'll help you understand.
Right. We will sort out the confusion as we go.
Exactly. I definitely remember the first time I played this was very not confusing as in I'm in over my head, just confusing as in what exactly is going on? How are they managing to do that?
Well, I can do what?
Yeah, what are all these levers? How are you pulling that lever? Like, I think that's where it lies. So let's dive right into the yellow phase. So this is going to be the map and the stock market, which is typically where we set. And we're also going to throw in the tile set this time, because the tile set is a very important part of this game. And I think understanding how it works, when I've lost this game, a lot of times it's been because somebody understands how the purple tiles work and being able to get that extra tile lay and get that extra tile placement and get a better tile than I had and get better runs as a result. All that stuff factors in for sure. So the tiles are pretty standard set, but there are some that are certainly restricted, and they're only available if you have a minor company that you can use its special one-time use power that you can then lay. And it's in addition to any tile lay you may have. So you can upgrade. A lot of times it'll be a doink. You can get a doink, a dit, a town, a dot, and you can.
That's the only way to upgrade those towns.
Exactly. And you can make them worth $20, and in Brown they can be worth $30, which when you're running plus trains, that's moolah.
That's pretty good.
That's bank, which is pretty awesome. Some of the OO tiles can only be upgraded by the large companies in Brown, so you can be really restrictive as that. Not to mention some of the certain shapes, I believe, are also restricted in the medium companies. So there's a lot of restriction that you might think that this tile is available to you because it is in every set, but it's not unless you have the power to unlock it. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, it's very critical.
So that's kind of the tile set in a nutshell. I love them. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's a great way to kind of add in a little fun into what can be kind of a, I don't want to say like a, oh, it's the tile, it's the set. Like it kind of feels like it is what it is. Maybe it's tight, maybe it's restrictive, whatever. But this puts a new spin on it that my operational brain really likes, and I certainly enjoy it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the unique aspects of this game.
Yeah. So why don't you, since I went off on tiles there, and I apologize if I'm verbose tonight. It's the nature of the beast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on the basic map as it is?
Sure. Well, I kind of feel like, the routes kind of all eventually turn out to be relatively the same as you play the game over and over and over, with the variation being in what order do the companies come out. Right. But that's fine, right? That's just the nature of this map. I still enjoy laying track on this map. But Chris, tonight when we were playing our 2-player game, you said something that really resonated with me about the map. And so I will remind you of what you said, good sir.
Please.
And so let me remind everybody, right? There's 3 sizes of companies here: small, medium, and large. And for reasons that will become apparent when we talk about trains, one of the cool things when you're laying track is you have to keep in mind what kind of companies you have, what kind of companies you intend to have, because the small companies hate running to towns. The medium companies want to run to every town,
everywhere.
And the large companies, they kind of don't care because they can run the towns or they can ignore towns. So while you're laying track, it's like, oh man, do I want to go around that town or through that town based on what I've got going on right now? So I think that right there is what makes the map fun for me. And the way you said that in our game tonight just really brought it home for me.
It's one of those things I don't think I got at the beginning, but because we've played games that have, we talk about, the one that like Hutton designed where you have freight trains, you have E-trains, you have regular trains. Well, what's cool is we have that, but then on top of that, we also have different companies that are able to run those trains. So there might be a reason to keep a plus train in a medium company because you can knock every doink 3 ways to Sunday.
Yeah, man.
But when we get into stock market, which is also why I didn't win our game, there are reasons why you might not want to do that. But there's a reason to keep a medium company running deep into the game.
Do you have any thoughts on the map?
It's one of those maps that looks really big when you first start playing on it, and parts of it get small very quickly, right? Like they get congested, right? And I think part of that's due to tile restriction and things like that. And I think there's this initial need to like get into the big town on whatever map you're on, right? Like everybody says, like you can put a new 18xx game down in front of everybody, and one of the first things everybody's going to do is, where's the big center that I need to make sure I have a token? While that exists in this game with Prague, I don't think you're a winner or a loser if you don't have a token in there. Like, I think it's nice to have it, but I don't think it's a make or break. I think there's plenty of other rich areas, and definitely early in the game. It's super valuable late, but chances are you can get an end run into there anyway. But it's not like Moscow in 61, where if you don't have a token in there, don't even bother playing. I don't feel it does that. So it's kind of interesting in how it's still open and there are pockets of interest, but those little pockets get congested very quick. And there's not a lot of bypassing built. There's not a lot of, working around. There's a lot of, can I get some more dits from my medium companies? Like that'll come up and things like that, but it's not, I don't feel like there's any one force driving your map building other than what's the best route I can get. Does that make sense?
It does. And you can lay some tragic track here and there.
Yes, especially when we get to the 2-player variant, because there are controls.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yes, which I think is why. Well, we'll get to that later.
Yeah, we'll do.
The market.
Yeah, market.
So the market's interesting because I think different companies can open at different points. So you can only open small, medium, large in different bands on the track, and it's a 1D stepped market. There we go. Because it's offset, right? Like you go
you move zigzag.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like you lose full value; you lose like half when things get sold or things like that. So it's not a brutal market. It's not the waterfall market we're used to from 30, and it's definitely not a linear market by any means, but it's a very interesting offset 1D market. The bands are crucial, I think, because being able to start full cap companies, being able to start them at the highest amounts is generally always going to be better for you than starting in lower amounts, right? Like opening companies cheaply in full cap games never works out for me. It just never does. It's a company that's way underfunded, and it's just it never has a way to get money other than holding, and it already started out in the hole. That's just not great. I really struggle with that one. But the interesting thing I think gets into it, we kind of talked about it a little bit, is the small and medium companies, they move one box at a time when they move forward. And they move one box back. However, the large companies will move 2 boxes. And
one back though, since you mentioned back, but if they pay any dividend, they move up 2.
Right, which is huge. And I would argue when we played our 2-player, okay, I might be ignoring the fact that I had to spend $850 in trains out of pocket, maybe, when I was leading going in, but the fact that Tony had more of the larger stocks, definitely a lot more in a percentage, even though I tried to buy up some, it still wasn't enough to catch up because the capital gains were just, those double jumps are... I think they're deceptive. I don't think you're ready for them on your first game or two, and you think you need to be. Why don't you bring us into the green phase where we talk about the train roster and what the heck is with all these trains? There's you got alphabet soup in my trains, Tony.
Oh my God. What's that song, right? What a long, strange trip it's been. Well, that's what I think, like, because when you buy the physical copy, they're just, they're cards, right? They're wafer thin. And you pull it out, and there's all these trains, and you're like, "Oh my God!" And they're triple-sided, right? Like this one's blue on this side, it's red and green on this side, right? It's a long, strange train trip through the deck here, but it works. It works really well. The trains, they're, it's your typical 2-train, 3-train, 4-train for the little companies. Because the little companies can only run the N trains, right? And then the medium-sized companies can run the plus trains. So it's, 2 plus 2, 3 plus 3, that kind of thing. And then the large companies can only run the express trains. So it's
right.
I think, what is it? It's a 3 express is the first one, then a 4, right, and stuff like that. So the train numbers are normal, but the companies can run different kinds of trains, and so the train deck it has letters on it, like A through J, and so the A trains are all bought first, and then the B trains, and so the phases are driven by the letter rather than the number of the train, which it's kind of different, kind of confusing, but it works. It really works.
It does, and you realize that the 2A trains are junk.
They are junk. Sadly, you got to buy
a 2 train is the sucker bet. Buying a 2A train it's like working at a dollar roulette table. It's bad.
Don't start a company in the first stock, in the first stock round. That way you won't have to buy any A trains.
They're literally like, I will buy 1, even though I can run 2, just so I don't get stuck with the second one, because it is literally, it has no future. It has no future.
Well, yeah. And when we talk about mergers and shenanigans, or acquisitions to be more appropriate,
right,
we'll explain why the A trains, aren't as desirable.
They suck even worse.
That's right.
Right?
They're cheap, though.
They are. I mean, in a full cap game, it's certainly cheap. We did talk about that there are 3. One of the other things that's kind of interesting about the train roster is the fact that, and especially if you play on 18XX, so don't pull a Todd. Only certain companies can run certain trains. All right. And when we say don't be a Todd, don't buy a train that your company can't run, because you don't get ever, without exception, more on that later, you don't get to upgrade it. So if you buy a plus train into a small or a large company, A, it's legally allowed to buy that train, but B, it will never be able to run that train. So you can move trains around that way, sure, but I see a little of that, but I don't see a lot of that. Which might be meta for our group, right? Like, we might not do that train. Like, my big company just bought a train for my little company. That might
Nick likes to do that.
Yeah. But it's definitely it's an option, and it's interesting, and I think it's one of the things that's pretty cool, that you buy a train and you can't even run it. You have to burn a turn to sell it. Yeah.
But hey, like halfway through the game, you can have one of your bigger companies buy a permanent train for one of your smaller companies, right? And so,
cheaply,
no liability, right?
Exactly. And if you have a medium-sized company that has a plus train that's just gobbling up dits that are 20, 30 a pop, that's a very smart thing to do. And exactly. You can get some cheddar, because
cheese.
Now, one thing we didn't mention is that the train also, the game exports trains. Like, so there is no stalling the train man. He is coming. He just keeps constantly gobbling up trains and getting them out of the way.
So let me ask, that's correct, right? The trains will be exported. Do you feel any danger, any train pressure in this game?
So I think 2 things can happen in that environment, right? I think number 1, you can get pressure in rusting pressure, right? Like, oh my God, the game's going to buy trains and it's going to rust my stuff out. I definitely feel like that in a lot of other titles. This game, however, I feel like that purchase generally is good, in that it opens up other phases of the game more than it has horrible rust events for me. Does that make sense? Like, hey, the game's going to put us into green. The game's going to put us into brown. That's cool. It's not going to rust the crap out of my trains. Like, right. I feel more relief than I do pressure when I play.
Okay. Yeah, I don't feel train pressure either, right? And maybe that's because my style of play is to keep building bigger companies and eating the little companies, thereby alleviating that lower pressure, right? Yeah, so I don't know. I don't feel much danger, and I do have like one beef with the game is I wish there was one less train in the rank of the letter I.
Okay.
Because in so many of our plays, the 4 express train has been permanent.
Yeah.
And it's very cheap for a permanent train. And that happens if we don't get to the J's, right? So if there was one less I, the J would happen much more frequently, if not all the time. And that 4E wouldn't be permanent, and maybe then I'd feel some train pressure. So that'd be my one complaint with the game.
Yeah, I think
I don't mind if there's no train rush or anything like that, but I just feel like maybe it's too easy. Is that the right word? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I don't feel enough pressure.
I think pressure is the right way to describe it, right? Like we don't feel the angst, like what the heck is going to happen next round? Like that doesn't usually happen in this game. The fact, and to the point, the fact that I had to buy 2 trains out of pocket, I was kind of like, where'd this come from? Like it just felt like it crept up because you engineered it, because that's what you should do, right? I had 2 trains that I thought would be semi-permanent, and they ended up not being, which cost me. So yeah, I know. I agree. I think that the pressure's not there. And I think it's important also to reiterate the way the train roster works. And just because you say I trains, you really need to look at the train roster to understand how they rust, because they don't rust uniformly. And I think that especially with new players, that's very, very, like, understanding that concept is key to being able to stay ahead of this. And I think you can. I think it's not hard. You can gobble companies. You can buy a company you can buy a train with a bigger company, sell it down. Like, I think there's lots of tools to be able to mitigate that pressure, as little as it is. I think it's very easy. But it's a completely different kind of roster, especially if you've only played it online. Playing it with cards, you can make little piles, and you can kind of see that a little easier, I think. But it's one of the things I love about this game is that it's completely different.
I want to just add to what I said by saying I don't believe every game needs a train rush or anything like that, right? Like, I personally enjoy that, right? There's nothing wrong with the 4E, being permanent, I guess, right? It's an operational game anyway. But I think the thing that rubs me wrong with that when that happens is that train is run by the big companies that are already advantaged by double jumping. It really doesn't need the advantage of a cheap permanent train too, So I think that's what kind of, bugs me a little bit there.
It gives those big companies, of which there's not, if you're playing with a 5-player game, somebody's not getting one anyway. So I think it kind of gives them that little bit of advantage. They're getting an advantage with the double jump as well.
Yeah.
They get a bonus when they run to their home. Yes, there's less token spots available, but they can also open some up with good purple tile placements and things like that. So I can see that. That makes sense. Yeah. Toads. Cool. All right. Anything else on trains, Tony? We good? We covered this? We beat this horse?
Well, just want to talk about the upgrading, but we can do that in the shenanigans when we talk about acquisitions.
I think shenanigans and acquisitions almost should be the SNA, almost brown phase, russet phase. Sorry, russet phase.
Russet.
We'll go old school with russet. So shenanigans. So in operational games, traditionally, there's not a ton of room for shenanigans because we tend to think stock markets when we think shenanigans. But I think that some exist in this game. So So Tony, you've already started alluding to this one, so I'm just going to let you run with it. What are some of the places of shenaniganery that exist in this game?
Well, yeah. So I don't know. Should we just start with the local railways?
Yeah, absolutely. Dive right in, head first.
Because they're kind of shenanigan-y in terms of like, I can give myself money, full price for that local railway, take it into my company, maybe lay one of those cool purple edge tiles.
Very cool. Very cool. Swanky.
Then dump that I can just dump that local onto the bank and get all the money back.
All the money.
So and then buy a train.
and it's one of those, it's the funny shenanigan, because you think like, oh, nobody has train money, and then you realize Kelly's sitting there with a company that has 3 little companies gobbled up inside of it, that's sitting on 3 locals. Yeah, 3 locals that has like $200 at its disposal. And then you're like, wait, where did that money come from? And all of a sudden he's got 3 tiles cropped across the board. And you're just like...
He likes to, Kelly buys a lot of those locals, and he likes to chew through those purple edge tiles as fast as he can so that you don't get them.
Exactly.
Hey, I guess
and
that's
he knows them. Yeah. And he uses them to great effect. So that is certainly, I think those locals are huge shenanigan.
Yeah.
Acquisitions. So I kind of feel like a lot of games, acquisitions are almost a means to an end, right? Like you need a big company, you have to gobble up little ones in order to get there. And I think that, we see that play out. Companies merge, they become bigger, they turn into 10 shares. This one seems to be very different because we open them as large companies and then they're able to buy the smaller companies. So there's a moment where other people can then invest in the smaller company they think is going to get gobbled up and participate in some of the shares and get some of that money.
Get paid.
Get paid. But I don't feel like the game is forcing you to do it to stay out of train trouble either. Like when I'm playing 22, that's usually why I'm gobbling up a company, is because I'm trying to stay out of train trouble. It's completely different reasoning behind why you might gobble somebody up in this one. Like tokens are certainly key. Yes. And then that's another huge part. What do you think?
That's spot on, man. And you can gobble up the companies to remove your liabilities, which then lets you upgrade the trains, right? Unless you bought those A trains, because those A trains don't upgrade.
B trains are much better, but
no. But you can take a 3 train if a medium-sized company buys the little company, and pay some money to turn it into a 3+3, right? And stuff like that. So it's a great way to, ratchet up your trains a little bit as you take away your liabilities. But yeah, like you said, that's not the only way to play, right? Because I can also just take my big company, flush with money, and buy a permanent train for my little company and run it for the end of the, I own 75% of that company. Let's just put a real train in it,
Right. So, which, if you're looking at dividends, is great. But if you're looking at stock and that big company's double jumping while your little one's singles, you may want to spend your tight certificate limit on different things, because the certificate limit comes up pretty quick. I don't say it's super tight, but it's definitely... You notice it. I
noticed it tonight that you got to the limit quicker than I did. And
I think that was a result of me having medium companies, because I didn't need as much to run them as much.
Right? You were buying paying shares, and I wasn't till the end, right?
I was going to say, I was winning up until that final stock round.
Well, that's
you buy that T-shirt now, but
final stock round.
Na 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 na. Anymore, and we'll have YouTube violations. But
that's right.
Check it out, Teespring. I had to make a shirt, and I had to do a drawing, kind of to commemorate literally every time we played, and it happened a lot with CZ because it is paced very, so we knew when final stock round was happening.
We knew when it was going to be.
It came up a lot. It certainly did.
I want to ask you, Chris, how do you feel about the shenanigans around in the 2-player game, Václav, and controlling the tiles and the tokens of his 1, then 2, then 3 companies?
So interesting, right? Like I'll be honest with you, I play a lot of Euros 2-player with my wife, and there's a lot of times Fresco is the one that immediately comes to mind, where there is Leonardo, and if you have control of Leonardo and you can move him around and you can do his stuff for him, you can impact somebody else. And I kind of felt like that with Václav. Like there were times where I wanted the control over the token, not the track, because I wanted to make sure that the tokens you were laying were not in my way. So I had to prioritize and say, I don't care if you lay screwy track, you're not getting that token, right? Like I can't give you that because that's a hot mess. And then there are other times where I was like, no, I need to have control over that track because he's completely intertwined with my medium company. So I didn't get it at first. It wasn't a big deal at first. He was just kind of out there in the East Field just doing whatever he was doing. And then all of a sudden it's like there's a point halfway through the game where I'm like, crap, I need to pay attention, because if he lays a token here, I'm completely cut off. So I need to make sure I'm second place. And
that Václav guy is a jerk, man.
When he's controlled by you, he is, for sure. He plays some, I don't know what track he's laying, but I cared a lot more about tokens for half the game. So by the end of the game, I was certainly paying attention to how that split went. Like I cared a lot more about what his SX was doing, which was his 10-share company, because he was his fate was super intertwined with mine, and I needed to make sure So what did I do? I went and I bought a ton of stock in that SX, and I just tried to make sure that I had control of the priority of that. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the cool things is like priority deals is determined in a descending order of cash. Yeah. So it's like,
you can't
if I want to control the little one and the big one's track, I need to make sure that you end the stock round with less money than me. Right? So I might not buy something, or you have to pay attention to the other players' funds to determine who's gonna run that company.
So what's interesting is that I haven't played many 2-player 18xx games, and both of them have been with you. So we played Chesapeake.
Both of them.
Right? We played Chesapeake and we played this. Well, that's not true. I played some 1800 and some 89, and I've done some other.
That doesn't count.
Kelly and I played 61 with 2-player. So, but I mean, full games, paying attention and really kind of focusing on what's going on, and so completely different. And priority deal has a huge part to do with that, right? Like in this game, priority deal, you can manipulate, so you can really kind of control that. But then the way the other one uses the extra share and how it gets sold out, and it kind of goes to a dummy depository. I think it's interesting how they both handle 2 players completely different approaches.
Yeah, sure.
But I think they really give a lot of stability to that 2-player experience, which is huge, because you can't do that in an auction game. You just can't. And that's a third of these games is, having that chunky auction. Every stock round is an auction. When you think about it, it's, there's a lot of those parts that do not lend themselves to 2-player games. And I think that, both Chesapeake and I think especially CZ has really leveraged that very nicely. And I think that I don't feel like you play a compromised game in a 2-player game.
Yeah.
Right. Like I still feel like I don't feel any different after playing our 2-player game than I do after playing a 5-player Monday night game. Like I have just as much agency and control over myself. I can see my decision points where I lost. I can see where I did well.
Yes.
I can look back and I can look at all those individual points and I can graph them. That's a good sign of a good game to me.
You know, the 2-player 18CZ game has a couple of things built in that can prevent some zero-sum-ish type of things, right? And when we were playing, you know, live, right, there were people watching us play, and I think it was Red-Eyed Ghost. It's like, in this game, you can buy 70% of those large companies. Right. It was Red-Eyed Ghost, I think it was, that said, oh, that's good, right? Because 70-30 is better than the 60-40 split.
Right, which we had.
Right. We had one 70-30, we had a 60-40. And then the little companies, while they're in the game, it's okay to own 75% of those. So you can really get some imbalances, which is good, right? Rather than, hey, Chris, you get half and I get half. Right.
Because you do that thing, I'll just take half. I'll take,
right.
You take 50, you take 60, I'll take 40. The delta's not much, but 70-30.
It's got those medium companies, right? Okay, 60-40 can happen there. But the little companies and the big companies, you can actually go ahead and get a significant lead in share value or percentage, I should say. And so I think that's cool.
And I think it's also, you know, I think another point of where I kind of missed the boat was in a lot of other games, you kind of value those smaller companies that you own like 50% of, and you're just doing 50-50 pays and you're making bank. Like 22 does that, right? Like I remember I put a 6-train in a small company on 22 and ran that thing to win. Like that thing was a beast. But in this one, that distinction between the double jump on the large companies and that single jump on the small really makes a huge difference to say, yeah, you might make more money running your little train on that small company because it has a baller of a route, but you're not going to get the huge dividend that you need to win and do 3 double jumps in a row in the final OR. You know, that's huge, and I think this game, I love the 2-player. I love it. You got to.
It is my preferred way to play this game.
Yep. Which
I would rather play this with 2 than 3, 4, or 5.
So that takes us straight into the gray phase because we're going to go right there. Literally. I don't even think there's 3 gray tiles in the game. Prague is definitely one of them.
Right.
But we'll talk about the gray phase in this one. And, you know, I've played this in multiple player counts, and I feel after my first play of 2-player with Tony, like if I'm going to ever play a 2-player 18XX, this is it. Like I love that decision space. I felt like every decision I made accumulated in my end result. I don't always feel that way. I always feel like I run the best company. How did I lose? I run the best companies and I own the best stocks. How the heck did I not win? I had the best route. How did I not win? In this game, I feel like I can look at every decision point and I can see where I made the mistake. And for me, that makes it a wholesome experience, right? Like, you know, yes, Tony did some things and played in my sandbox and messed with that and screwed up the train rush. But it was my response to that like I could have gobbled up a company. He offered to buy one. I probably should have let him. I probably should have let him. But it's no, I really liked it. I've enjoyed it at all player counts. I don't like the bigger player counts because I feel like it gets a little. I think if somebody who likes operational games, I feel like you always end up not getting something that you kind of feel you want or need. And that to me kind of, I struggle with those points. You know, like if I feel like I need a company and I need a thing and I want to do B tactic and I can't, and I'm kind of short because you can't own a company 4 people before you bought the company. You can't do that. That bothers me. Like I don't love that. So, and that's true whether I'm playing 30 or not. Like if everybody opens companies in front of me and all I'm staring at is the B&O and I'm like, I'm not opening that dog. You can have the B&M. I don't want it. You know, like whatever.
The Baltimore and Maine or Boston and Maine.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe on a bad bet, but not the B&M. Like nobody deserves that. Sorry, Boston. It's the reason it's called the BM.
The BM.
So Tony, what are your you've already kind of hinted at them, but what are your kind of feels on this guy?
Well, I definitely think it's a good game, not a great game, and I just mentioned my preferred player count is 2 for this game. I just think it's a lot of fun at 2. I mentioned I don't really feel any danger unless I'm falling behind on share count of the big companies. Then I'm in danger, right? Like that kind of thing.
Right.
I really love the purple edge tiles and the local companies and how that all works together, and the silly shenanigans you can do with the local companies. Buy them and get your money back.
I tell you what, if that's one thing that I could incorporate into more games,
it's fun.
It's that a company could sell back its private after it's used its ability. Like I would love that. That's just
I don't know of any that do that other than this. Yeah.
I love that because I love that little stash of cash that nobody remembers. I love that.
One of the feelings I get whenever I play this game, because it's on that fixed track, right? And so you look and the token is halfway down the track, and you look at the map and you're like, we're never going to get to brown tiles, right? Because it's like such a slow burn right there, right? But what you don't, like even though you're halfway through the track, the rest of the operating rounds are 2s and 3s, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 there's brown tiles everywhere, in the cities and stuff like that. So I always feel like it's on a ramp, right? Like, we're never going to get to brown. Boom, we're in brown.
I love it. Tonight we were playing it, all of a sudden I'm like, hey, we're in gray, by the way. Did you?
Right.
We didn't even realize it.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely have fun with the game. Again, I think it's a good one.
Yeah. It was one of the first I bought. Because I kickstarted it early, and it's one of the first games into my collection. Happy to have it. I don't know if Scott still has any. I know he had a bunch that he sold. And there's even rumors, there's truth that the Czech edition actually has dual printed tiles. So they're different graphics on both sides. So you have more, I don't want to say frou-frou graphics, but less Train Gamer inspired graphics on the standard side, and then our normal curvilinear track on the other. So there's that edition, but that's literally the Polish edition. I think the Fox in the Box Polish edition, or Czech edition, not the Fox in the Box US. So
English, gosh.
Right, and I believe that's what Lonnie told me. But it was interesting. I thought that was kind of like, no, I kind of want the other version just to kind of have it, but I don't know. Definitely, I'm happy to have it in the collection. It's great. It's also one of those that falls in that great with 3, because it also, we talked a huge amount about 2, and that's also because we just played that. But it really does 4 and 5 well. 6, but 3, it also does a slightly smaller map. It does the 2-player map with 3 people, so it scales really nicely with 3 players. So if you're one of those groups where you only have 3, you could do a lot worse than having, say, 49 and CZ on your table. Great 3-player game.
I've not played that 3-player scenario. It's got a separate map. I've not played that one.
Yeah, it's very similar to the 2-player experience, except for obviously instead of having a third,
there's no boss
say dummy player, right?
Yeah.
That's just that's another human, and it's good, and it still feels like operationally constrictive as far as it feels a little smaller and a little tighter, which is actually the main reason why I picked it up, because a lot of times, especially when I started out, I only ever had 3 people to play with, so 3-player games were very high on my priority list out of the gate.
Awesome.
Excellent. So that's all our phases, and that brings us to the priority deal marker, which I'd argue in this case is kind of a misnomer, because it changes every single time. You almost need you need something to keep track of who's 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's solely based on money. So
I have some nice wooden numbered markers 1 through 6 that have the Trax logo all engraved in the back that a buddy made. So we just break those out because, like you said, there's not really a single marker to mark who's first and you go to the left, right?
Right.
Play could be all over. So.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it can kind of catch you out, priority deal in this one, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not going to be the end of your game if you don't have it, right? But for instance, in this round, unfortunately, Tony got both of the large companies that were available in a 2-player game. Even though I had the money, I wasn't able to open one. So that was...
But you got all the medium ones. Just the way things fell,
Yeah, so I'll take the consolation, right? And they all were maximized routes, so it's not the end of the world. But it's one of those things where it's fun to watch. I don't know, I don't know enough about Czech culture to say what would be a great systematic way to put that as far as priority deal markers go, but
I don't know either.
I don't, but if you do,
well,
leave them in the comments.
We both like beer, and the Czechs do have a nice beer culture, so maybe some beer bottles, right?
Right. Pilsner Urquell is literally came from Urquell, is Czech in origin, which is also the basis for let's see, Budweiser, Coors, all that, Budweiser is a Pilsner, it's not a lager. Even though I think it wants to say it's an American lager, I believe it's a Pilsner. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. I'm 3 beers and 2 drams into a bottle of Michener, so take that with a grain of salt. I'm not a beer expert. I just know I don't drink Budweiser, so it doesn't even matter.
I would never drink a Bud, therefore.
They're giving away free Buds if you are vaccinated, and I won't even donate mine to somebody because I love you too much to give you a free Budweiser.
Too much.
And on that note, we're gonna wrap this one up. This was a lot of fun. I like, CZ, it's been a while. It's been on the table, and the reason we've delayed doing it is because, Tony, I wanted to get that 2-player in before we talked about it, because I don't think it would be fair to talk about that one-sided. And I'm with you. I love the 2-player. 2-player's good.
Well, I'm ready, willing, and able to fire it up with you again at any point.
Yeah, I mean, we just need to kick those other guys out. Like,
we played it in 2 hours or less, so yeah. And it's much nicer not having Nick and Kelly kicking our butts, right?
Yeah, I have a 50% chance. No, I have a 30% chance because what's his name? The dummy player almost beat me last time. So
Vaslav, yeah. Don't lose to Vaslav.
Don't lose to Vaslav. That's yeah, exactly. So until next time, we have no idea what that'll be. We just
game.
Yeah, it'll have an 18 in the title probably. I think that's safe to say. So we'll talk to you June 1st, which, oh my goodness, June 4th, I turned 50. That's big. That's big.
It is big, man. Milestone.
I don't feel any kind of way about it, but it's just like, wow, really?
I've got 6 years on you, but I still feel like I'm 12, so. You'll feel
Amen
the
to
same.
that. Amen to that. I'm only as old as I drink, and this is 18 years, right? Yep. There we go. Perfect. All right. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, listening, and checking things out. And we'll see you next time on Wheel Tapping.
He said checking things out.
Thanks for joining us this month. Be sure to tune in next month to see what shenanigans Tony and I will get ourselves into. Tony and I would like to give a special shout out to all the patrons who support the show. Thank you for listening, supporting, and taking care of us. You can also help us out if you want a shirt. Be sure to check us out on Teespring.
Punchboard Media, where we all
Bring something
to the table.
pull up a chair.
At punchboardmedia.com.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to pause for 1 second while I find my goddamn notes. I closed them and I don't know where the hell they went. Checking things out.
Czech
Just like
Czech
the library.
Republic.
What?
Czech Republic.
Czech Republic. A check says what? Who thought there'd be outtakes? Well, I did when I realized how drunk we'd be by the time we got here, but